Tai Dinger, welcome back to the Learning Effect podcast. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Appreciate being on again.
This is probably one of the first times we've ever been in the same time zone. Uh, I forget where you grew up. You may have grown up on the Eastern time zone. I think you grew up in DC or something like that. But last time we talked, you were probably in Stanford or Boulder or somewhere. What's the take on Eastern time zone? How do you like it?
Eastern's great. I feel like it's like the most productive time zone for me. But you're right. I've moved. I think I've lived in every time zone, U.S. time zone. Um, but Eastern, yeah, you're up before all the California people, so that's nice. Get some work done, and then you can log off when California people are still working. So it's it's a good it's the powerful time zone, I feel like. Everyone works on Eastern time. Yeah.
Let's go back to roughly some point last year, and you can fill in the details here when you decided to move to Boulder. Take me through that decision and mindset that you've had in 2024.
Definitely one of the hardest decisions I made. I'm in the middle of a very long degree program, grad degree program, and at in the spring last year, I was feeling a little bit burnt out from school, and also I had this thing I really wanted to do, which was to be or like live like a professional runner, and specifically also live in Boulder, which is a place I knew I loved. And I thought, I have maybe 4 to 5 years left of school. It feels, on the one hand, irresponsible to take a year off in the middle and push my career and everything that follows after school out another year. But again, like the timing with running with the Olympic trials and the Olympics in 2024, that was also an opportunity that wasn't going to come across or come around very often. And I thought, you know, 5 years ago, where did I think I would be today? Um, and I realized like I had no intentions of being in like a joint degree program, um, like studying exactly what I'm studying. I had a very different vision for myself 5 years ago, and I'm super happy where I am, even though it wasn't part of that vision. And translating that to the spring of 2023, I thought, okay, so I'm thinking about school and my career in a way that pretends like I know exactly what I'm going to be doing in 5 years. And that's why I won't pursue running. And I thought, pause to think about that a little more deeply and realize that one, I have no idea, even if I have an idea of what I want to be doing in 5 years, I have no idea the path that's going to get me there, or if that's actually what I'm going to want to do in 5 years. And then two, I really, really, really want to do running for a year and live the lifestyle, and be in that community, like fully immersed in that community. And so I made the decision that that's what I was going to be happiest doing, and also trust that that could be part of the path. Um, Even in academics, like I would use my year of running as, if not like a professional experience, a very personally meaningful and impactful year. And but at some point, I just had to take the leap and tell this school that I wasn't coming. I was going to try to train for the Olympics and see where that took me. And I'm super glad I took that leap every day. Yeah.
Not to discredit other people's paths in life or decisions, but filling out your story some more for those who didn't listen to our first conversation with each other
Mhm.
2 years ago, which I imagine most people here are new to the podcast since that episode. When we're talking about school and schooling in your path, you're in the 0.001% of people who went to Stanford and then you now are at law school at Harvard. So we're talking about pretty high level, the best institutions in the world, not like, going to law school at Ohio State where I live currently. Like these are,
That's a
you're
great
turning
school.
down.
It's a
Okay.
great
Well,
school.
let me give you your flowers. You had to make more difficult decisions because of kind of the, how high level these places were. Was that difficult at all? And how did you articulate those things to your family or friends in terms of processes or decisions to come to that point?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you're right that in at being at Harvard Law, I'm also in a PhD program at Harvard. I'm surrounded by very ambitious people who have, a lot of my classmates have wanted to be lawyers for a really long time since they were kids. They wanted to go to Harvard Law and practice law as quickly as possible. And making a decision in that atmosphere, to like deviate from the single track, like go, go, go mindset was hard, because I felt like I was going against the grain, or I was going against the grain. Um, I think being older, so I graduated Stanford in 2018, so I'm a lot older than a lot of the folks in my law degree program, gave me more perspective on what's important to me. I always knew throughout this decision process that running was going to make me happy, and doing running for a year was going to make me really happy. And at the end of the day, I decided that is also super important. That career is one thing, but isn't it okay to just be happy and do things that will make you happy? Um, and putting aside what everyone else around me was how they were making decisions, not to discredit how they were making decisions, but deciding that I was going to make decisions in a different way. Yes, it was hard, but at the end of the day, you are the one making the decisions for your own happiness and goals, and so that's what I ended up doing.
Not saying that you're hanging up the shoes for good. You just placed ninth in the US at the 20K championship. So a lot of running ahead for Tai Dinger. But was it freeing to have the mindset of like burning the boats and going all in for a year and seeing the results that came from it? Because I think a lot of times people in your shoes, because there are a lot of people who come out of college and they're not quite good enough to get a massive contract that makes them only do running, but they're also not quote unquote bad enough that they can like hang up the spikes and feel good about it. And they're kind of in that weird, awkward space where it's like, I maybe could make it if I keep working at it. How much peace do you feel like came from that year of going all in?
Yeah, on the one hand, I would say I'm so glad that I did that year and really tested the limits of what I can do just in a year of running. And turns out, like a big goal was to make the U.S. Olympic trials in track and field, and I was able to do that, and also develop a community, or become a part of the Boulder running community, and these are things that I wouldn't have been able to do if I hadn't just taken the year off. And so on that, um, front, I feel at peace. Like I did it, I went for it. I didn't make the Olympics. I don't have a huge contract at the end of the year, but that's fine because I got to experience it. On the other hand, I did get closer than most people. I made the 5K trials. I was, I had some great results on the roads, and I also, was running with people who did this for a living and saw how happy they were doing it for the most part. And that made me want it even more. So I think, yeah, somehow I'm holding both those ideas at the same time. I'm so glad I did it and tried it out, and it didn't, it wasn't the fairy tale ending. I that was, in the realm of possibility. And so I'm going to move on to the next thing, but also, man, it's so much fun. I want to get back to that, at some point. And, maybe this year is not the year for that. But in the future, I want to keep that door open.
You kind of described it a little bit there, but what's your relationship like with the sport of running at the moment?
At the moment, it's aspirational. I mean, right now I'm in a down week, so I'm getting into law school. It's very intense, and I'm trying to figure out what my life is going to look like in the next year. That being said, I also have some races on the calendar that I'm going to get into, and I want to run as well as I can, and I want to contend for teams in the future on the roads. That's a pretty long, luckily for me, that's a long vision of, 2028 is 4 years from now. There's a lot that can happen and a lot of time to get fit again. And so in the moment, it's focusing on the task at hand, which is readjusting to school and Boston. with the long-term vision of running still going to be very important to me, and I'm going to try to do it at the same level that I've been doing it since college.
You had this what I would call beautiful kind of reflection on Strava when you were leaving Boulder. Hopefully, we can get you some new Strava followers from this at Tai Dinger. Um, and there's a line that I absolutely loved for many reasons. One of the reasons being, you'll probably listen to this. You quote Coach Milt, and I believe he's talked about this on the podcast before, but so many of his athletes I feel like have spoken to this, so I want to get your take on it. You said, quote, in college, Coach Milt would tell us, quote, men, in this life you can have everything but not everything at the same time. Can you fill that out some more and elaborate on how that relates to you and kind of your experience with that quote and ideology?
Yeah, the context of that quote in college was, um, we were undertaking a very serious endeavor in Milt's eyes, which was being a part of a collegiate track program, and specifically a cross country program that was contending for the national title. Um, and he wanted to stress that that was going to take a lot of effort and time, and he needed people to commit to the process and to the team and to each other. And so, there are all sorts of reasons to go to college, to get the best grades you can, and to have summer internships and set yourself up for a career in the future, and to meet new friends and develop a community. And um, his point was, it is okay for you to want to do all these things, and all these things, including the running, are very important. Um, and and he was acknowledging that it's a hard decision to make, because you can't do all of them at the same time. Just truly effort wise and time wise, you just can't. And so he was trying to stress that if you decide to do that, you want to do this running thing and be part of a NCAA contending cross country team, then I need you to just do that now. Like, that has to be your main focus. And in the future, yes, there will be a time um, to pursue your career, right? Like the time to, what's that? I'm not religious, but there's that biblical verse that's like, a time to reap, a time to sow. That kind. There's a time for everything, um, and that doesn't mean you reap and sow at the same time. You just have to be patient and believe that you can fit that in later in your life. And so, yeah, I took that to heart. I've, in some ways, I have tried to do everything at the same time. I've tried to run and work or be in school at the same time. But it's just more meaningful when you go all in, and are able to appreciate what you're doing in the moment. And that requires focus and sacrifice. That's what that quote means, at least to me, that's how I interpreted it.
I'm excited because I think this opens us up to a broad discussion of some things that I chew on quite frequently. And one of the questions I'm curious to ask you is, how do you think people, but specifically like the listeners today, should evaluate sacrifices and what makes a sacrifice worth it? Because as we'll talk to and as you spoke to there, a lot of times to run X time, you have to give up a lot to run that time. And then you come to the evaluation of, is giving all of this up worth it to run X time and X event?
Geez, that is such a hard question, but so applicable to so many areas of life, to personal relationships and professional relationships, and like, when is it worth sacrificing for? And yeah, this is gonna be me just thinking in the moment, and we'll be curious to hear what you think too. But personally, it's been a bit of trial and error. There have been times in my life where I'm more heavily weighted into my professional goals, and also times when I am more focused on my running goals. And looking back, I have, in reflection, I have a sense of what, like, periods of my life I was happiest in, and where I felt most fulfilled. And that like you said, some sacrifices were worth it, and others I I don't necessarily feel FOMO about, but I think were missed opportunities. Even things as simple as going to like a trivia night with my friends instead of, or missing out on trivia night. Um, like those, sometimes the sacrifices seem small in the moment, but can compound if you make the same sacrifice over and over again. So I'd say, this is just an inherently super personal reflection process. It's what's important to you, what are your goals, and how important is it that you achieve those goals, right? There's, I think before, yeah, I'll pause there.
Something that's interesting in reading, listening to podcasts, studying the best athletes in the world is they all kind of, I think I heard a quote once, which is like, the best athletes in the world, the most successful people got really, really good at one thing by sacrificing nearly everything else in the process. And you go down the list of names like Tiger Woods, best golfer of all time. Some people might say Jack Nicklaus, but okay. I'm a new kid on the block, so can't speak to Jack. Tiger Woods, best golfer of all time, like terrible relationship with his family, abused alcohol. Michael Jordan, best basketball player in the world. Might offend some people with LeBron. Um, like terrible addiction to gambling. Tom Brady, divorce. Even like in our own sport, like Jakob Ingebrigtsen, terrible relationship with his father. And I think people want the results of those people, but they don't understand the journey to get there and the sacrifices these people made that ultimately generally affected their outside life a lot. Have you had any studying or reflection of the best of the best and just thinking of like, man, like I don't know if it's worth it. Like, yeah, I could sell everything and sell my soul for 10 years and maybe become one of the best runners in the world, but I might not have any relationships, happiness, and joy in my everyday life as a result. But hey, the Olympic medal might be cool. Like, what's that process
Yeah.
like?
Yeah, I've never done like a systematic study of people, but I know exactly what you're referring to. It's, and moreover, that's like I don't know what the right word is. Maybe you can help me out here, but like that's the lore in sports, right? Or in life in general. It's like these people got successful by sacrificing everything, and that we raise them up because of those sacrifices. And I don't know, I don't know if we should do that. Like, yes, if you think that thing that will make you happiest in the world is winning a medal at the Olympics, um, you know, you have to think about two things. Like, is that really what's going to make you happiest in the world? Like, hold that medal in your hand. Are you going to be ecstatic? And two, I suppose, like the probability of you getting there. Like the the payoff and the probability of the payoff, to think in like math terms, they have to they have to like multiply and add up, um, such that it's worth all the sacrifices. And me personally, I decided, um, in part in this past year too, that cultivating personal relationships is really important to me, and having friends and family. I think that is the most important thing in my life, is having a good relationship with my friends and my family. And then, um, also I have academic interests, that I also derive joy from just thinking about and talking to people with. And because I those are the most important things to me, running is not going to be able to be my singular focus, because it's not like the most important thing in my life. And winning a medal at the Olympics both is unlikely, and two, wouldn't be worth the sacrifices for me personally. Now I have a lot of friends from Stanford who are winning medals and have sacrificed a lot and continue to sacrifice a lot. And to them, you know, reaching the top echelons of the sport is very important to them, just personally. Like, not because they get paid a ton if they do it, or because they want the followers on Instagram, or whatever. They just really want to do it. And with them, you don't really like question why they came to that conclusion. You believe them, that that's the most important thing to them in their life, and respect the sacrifices that they have to make. But again, for them too, it's a personal decision. And they're just built that way, I suppose.
Something I'm curious to get your thoughts on. I heard this in a podcast, I want to say a week or two ago, and I actually sent it to Alex, as I tend to do with many, many quotes. But I thought there's so much value to this one. The quote was, "Everyone is jealous of what you've got. No one is jealous of how you got it." And you talk to some of those Stanford teammates who have won medals and gone on to do ridiculous things in the sport. And I bet for the vast majority of listeners, like 100% of them, they would want the accomplishment. But the vast majority, if they saw what it took to get there and the immense struggle and strain and dedication over, a decade long period of time, they probably wouldn't be willing to do that. And I think a lot of people, specifically high schoolers and collegians, in the age of social media and how people generally only post the glamorous things, think that it's like either luck or that that's what they'll get as a result of doing what they're doing. But I think for the most part, to get extreme outcomes, you have to live an extreme way for an extended period of time.
Yeah, and you have to love it, right? I mean, that's part of the doing it for a long period of time is you have to love love doing all like the small things. Even somehow paradoxically, even when it's hard, you just have to love that feeling. And I think that's like, yeah, that's where they say people are built different. That's where I see it the most. The people who are willing to spend like 3 hours in the gym after a hard workout. And I think, I'm taking an outsider's perspective, just like everyone else here, because I'm not built like that. I'm maybe, yeah, I mean, it's hard, right? And loving it is like not something you can force yourself to do. So,
Maybe a bit of a, I'm just opening up the discussion, but it might be a little bit of a hot take. What's your, like, we threw out the word sacrifices, and you think to like someone's life, very long life. And I feel like the sacrifices a 7-year-old makes is different from like a 5-year-old, right? 5-year-old, it might be like,
hmm
getting through a car ride without an iPad. That's not the same as, sacrifices we're
hmm
talking about. For the listener, who is probably generally high school, college, roughly younger age, I almost think that like the sacrifices in taking those sacrifices to see how far you can go in the sport are worth it in high school. But I think that as you get older, you should start to reevaluate what running means to you as it starts to take up more time. Because honestly, in high school, and this is just my opinion, like Ty, the friendships you have right now are probably so much more deep and meaningful, and you'll have for the rest of your life, as opposed to high schools where it's probably some cringy party that, like, yeah, you'll get some sort of fulfillment by being around people, but there's no really deep, meaningful. I mean, maybe you were a deep guy, so maybe you had that. But what's your take on like evaluating sacrifices depending on the age you're at? Because I almost think it's healthy for a high schooler to become a little obsessed with running and see how far they can go within it, because it is a hyper short period of time. And I think the trade
Yeah.
off for other things they'd be doing, like Fortnite or the other
Yeah.
things, aren't as valuable. Versus you, we're talking about literally becoming a lawyer from Harvard. Like, it's not the same comparison.
I think that's a great question and like a great point. Like the sacrifices you have to make change as you age. And it's obvious that old people are sacrificing like time with family. Maybe, I'm curious what you think the common sacrifices a high school kid would have to make. I think too that, you know, uh, and tell me if I'm going off track and giving bad advice, but you don't have to make like a ton of sacrifices in high school to be good or to be good enough to get to the college level. You just can't do like dumb things, you know. But if you like show up to practice and you're taking care of yourself and um, sleeping an adequate amount, like that's often good enough. And in high school, I feel like your job is to be good enough. If 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 your goal is to like continue running after high school at whatever level, determine that for yourself, what you want to do and what's important to you. Like what does a successful college experience look like for you? Does it, if it includes running, then yeah, maybe you don't join as many clubs. If it doesn't include running, then like just have fun. But even if you want to be the best high school kid, you're not. You don't have to sacrifice your social life. Everyone in high school has friends. You should have friends. Make friends. Like that's more important. And honestly, will probably make you a better runner if you're happier outside of running. Whereas post collegiately, you're talking about you have a job with Nike to run well and make the US team. That's a very serious promise that you've made to Nike. And you are going to have to make some serious sacrifices that are hard and are necessary to fulfill that promise. It's just not the same in high school. But interested if you think that's off track or off base. Yeah.
No, I think there's a ton of value there. And I think broadening the discussion even more and talking about the value of running and sport itself. One day when I'm a dad, whenever that is, like the reason I want to put my kids in sport is because I think the person you become in the process of doing the things that a runner does ultimately sets you up to be the individual you are today. Like the Running Effect podcast would not be what it is today without running. One, obviously, because it's a running podcast, but two, and more broadly, because all of my traits I feel like have come from the sport of running, and I learned them. Like I learned the value of consistency from running. I learned the value of dedication from running. I learned the value of community from running. I learned the value of patience from running. Like, yes, I could have learned those in other avenues, I'm sure, but I think
Mhm.
the sport and the people I'm around accredit a lot of their success to the things they learned from being very serious about it, for whether it's high school or college. For you, I'm curious, like you're very much in the world now, and I'm sure maybe kids in your classrooms do run for fun or jog, but like how much of your success would you accredit, how much of you as a person and the attributes that Tai Dinger holds would you accredit to those years of high school and college of really exploring the sport?
Yeah, I think whenever I think about the skills I've developed through running, I the only like hard skill I can point to is like you tell me to run a lap in 72.5 seconds, I can run that lap in 72.5 seconds. And it's like such an incredibly useless skill. And I feel like everything else I could have learned in any other avenue of life. But you're right. It at the end of the day, it was running that taught me, well, yeah, this is this is also an interesting question. Like, did running teach me discipline, or am I good at running because I was disciplined? And that chicken and
Mm.
egg, uh, I don't have, I'm not going to have an answer for you. Honestly, the what running has given me, that I know isn't a chicken and egg question, is a community. Like I've met so many people through running, made really good friends through running. I have people all over the country, that I know through running and are that I can call my friends, and I feel very blessed to call my friends. And for me, that is the most important thing I've gained from running specifically. Um, a, a lot of some of the reasons I run are, or most of the reasons I run are like purely personal goals, not like I'm trying to develop a skill. It's how hard, what can I push my body to do? In the same way in school, I'm thinking, what can I push my brain to comprehend? Like, what subjects can I challenge my brain to understand? I'm kind of the same way in running. It's like, what can I get my body to do? That's really cool. Um, and so it's not so much skill development, but you're right. It has had these side effects of, I'm disciplined. Again, chicken and egg, unsure. But the people are huge, and they give me joy every day. So I'm very grateful for that.
Do you think though, if you played football, let's say for an example, that you would be the person you are today? Maybe this is a hot take. I would say no. I think running
Yeah.
has ultra specific behaviors that you have to engage in to be good. And I'm not saying that you don't with other
Hmm.
sports, but for whatever reason, I feel like running has very much. I mean, this is why we see runners in high school. You look at the studies; they, on average, have like much higher GPAs than other people.
Yeah.
Now, someone like you who knows and facilitates these studies could go into the details and why it could be other cases, but I generally think that runners in the practices in which you have to engage to be good at the sport are so, I
Hmm.
mean, look at the average football player in high school, their diets are just absolute crap, but they can get away with that. Running, you're not,
Yeah.
you're going to get a cramp, you're going to feel a ton of inflammation. That's just one of, I feel like, many examples of like running is a incredibly holistic sport. And I think, yeah, how you train for it and the lifestyle of it is very different than most every other sport.
Yeah, maybe I'll say one thing because this is something I've thought about is like why are, kids who are good at running, they can do school or yeah, I mean that's like the trend. And I think it's still like a chicken and egg question. I think the common thing between school and running is that there's a delayed gratification. Like running, you are training every day, but you're not getting good, or it's not obvious that you're getting good every day, right? If you're thinking about running in college, you're thinking about stacking bricks over like 10 years, starting in high school. And that's hard when you're not getting results. And I think school is similar that, um, probably a high schooler is not thinking like this, but you're investing in yourself to have a better career or have more flexibility in the future. Like if you do well in school today, and if you decide that college is the path for you, which of course I know you have a very different perspective on, because the types of jobs you want require a college degree, then you're investing in yourself now for a award that's not going to come for another 8 to 10 years. And so in that way, I think running and school are similar. And the question that you're posing is, does running teach you to be more um, uh, okay with rewards that are far in the future, or is it the kids who are able to, delay gratification that they become runners? And that's a study that maybe exists out there. I don't know. It would be so hard to study, but
Right.
the we would like to think that running is what teaches us the skill of delayed gratification, and it may totally be true.
I think the thing about sports as opposed to something like school is and if any kids have convinced their parents to let them drop out of school, please let me know how you did it. But you generally are like forced, let use that word lightly, to go to school at least, through 12th grades, and for 95% of people another 4 years after that. And because of that, the things, it's almost like you kind of forced to study to do well on tests, and that kind of comes
Hmm.
naturally. With running and sports in general, I think why you learn those skills is because it's a free pursuit. Like you choose whether or not you want to wake up at 6 a.m. to beat the heat to get your 15 miles in. And I think like the anyone who can do that, if you do that and you tell me you do that, I can then assume other behaviors in your life as a result of that one decision. And I don't know if you know Sahil Bloom. He graduated from Stanford. Excellent writer, one of the best newsletters out there. Was on the podcast last year, but he has this great saying. He's like, "There's no such thing as a loser who wakes up at 5 a.m. every day," and he's like, by the very fact that you can do that, like you're winning at life, and that will trickle down into other areas. So I think the beauty of sport or business or any sort of pursuit, much larger than just sports themselves, is it's a free pursuit. You get to choose, and there's really, for most circumstances, there's no really outside pressure or expectation that like you have to do it. Whereas school, and
Yeah,
I think we should have this. I'll definitely have this with my kids. Like, there's expectation. You go to school, you study to do well on tests, et cetera, et cetera.
yeah. No, that's a fair point. I do want to I think just maybe just briefly about like what it means to win at life, and that like waking up at 5 a.m. is super important. And I will say I'll preface this by saying yes, I am the type of person who does wake up at 5 to go run during the school year, because I mean really because I'm forced to. But I want to say that there are many ways to win at life, and I
Sure.
think this past year has taught me, yes, running is super. Always knew running was super important for me, but I didn't realize how important building a community and developing and nurturing friendships was to me. And you don't have to wake up at 5 a.m. to be really good to your friends, you know? And I think I personally didn't put as much stock um, in the value of having really strong interpersonal relationships before this year. And I've changed my thought in that winning at life is having good friends, being good to them, and and that again, you don't have to put yourself through a lot to do that. You just have to be curious and non-judgmental and um, yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you the last time I woke up at 5, so I'm all with you there. I'm all with you there. What you're saying there reminds me of Nick Saban, retired from football last year, one of the greatest college football coaches of all time. He gives his team this speech every year, like his new team at the beginning of every season, and he said, "If you want to be happy for an hour, eat a steak. If you want to be happy for a day, play golf. If you want to be happy for a week, go on a cruise. If you want to be happy for a month, go buy a new car." If you want to be happy in your life, ask yourself one question. If I didn't show up here today, would anyone miss me? And I think it kind of goes to your point of building that community and friendships. And truly, that's where a lot of life's value lies in, is that community and showing up for the people in your life and serving those people well.
Agreed. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Talking about some of the things you experienced this past year in Boulder, what are some of the highlights and moments you'll never forget, whether it's, pacing Elise Cranny for a workout or race experience or making the Olympic trials? Can you take me through some of those moments?
Yeah, I had a lot of great moments. I honestly, from the first day moving to Boulder, it was achieving a lifelong dream of being a semi-professional runner, like that being the focus of my life and living in Boulder. And so I thought at the beginning of the year, success would look like doing well in road races and track races and qualifying for the Olympic trials, which I did. And turns out that that was not the most meaningful part of my life. It was a totally random circuit, well, not totally random, but an unlikely sequence of events that led me to, as you mentioned, pace Elise for uh, much of the summer and parts of the spring. Especially after the U.S. trials, I was on Elise's training schedule. Like we were running together every day, and I was her workout pacer. And I got to go to Europe and help her prepare for Paris. And that was, I had known Elise for 10 years, and it was so meaningful to reconnect in that way and help a friend chase uh, a lifelong goal of performing well at the Olympics. And despite achieving my own goals for that year, helping Elise out was just brought me so much joy. So I'm really glad that something I hadn't planned for at all ended up being the best part of the year.
Not to go back into deep subjects again, but seems to be a trend with us. I think something that I've found interesting in talking to other people is they either unlock a new level of performance or enjoy what they're doing to a whole new extent when it comes at the service of helping another person. I think this is most commonly illustrated in like cross country teams when, track maybe didn't go too well because they were very focused on hitting a time personally, and then they go to cross and they're the fourth man, but they realize how important they are, and how stepping up and placing 5 places higher than they were expected to has such a big effect for those around them. What's your experience, whether it's in college or something like this past summer, as you mentioned with Elise, of how being at the service of other people will elevate you as a person and bring a new fond, probably love and appreciation for the sport?
I think like most high school kids, cross country was my favorite season. It was just so team oriented and so different from other parts of my life. And I loved that shared mission. Um, and that like seeing each other every day with that shared mission is so meaningful and definitely brought out the most in me because I don't know, that's just what made me happy back then and at Stanford too, was seeing my friends and having a shared goal. Um, I don't know if I know really why I was wired that way. It's just more fun that way, I suppose. And then yeah, helping out Elise train for the Olympics wasn't like I didn't have any goals there. I was or yeah, I was just there to help and be of use. And um, yeah, maybe some of it was freeing. I had like not very little was on the line for me at that time besides Elisa's success. Um, and that meant I could go about things uh, less stressfully, and you know, I wasn't really reflecting deeply on what my goals were in the moment. It was like, all right, Elise, what are we doing? What's the point of today? And I was for sure bought in because yeah, she was my friend. It's like it was a fun thing to do, and it was meaningful to her, which was important. And I guess I just wanted to be feel useful. I think running specifically too can sometimes feel like a useless pursuit, um, especially when you're not contending, to make the team, the Olympic team. There can be moments of why am I doing this? And the answer to that, for me was, I'm helping someone achieve their dream. That's very important to them. And even if it's not super important to me, um, it that doesn't matter. Like they believe it's important, so I'm going to help them achieve that. And that I guess in itself was very meaningful to me and worth getting out of bed for in the morning.
Did it ever feel like a movie, like back to the college days, probably some of that energy, Olympics, like, biggest event every 4 years, Elise's second time making the Olympics, first time where it was like a genuine Olympics because of last time being COVID. You guys go to Europe, probably eating all sorts of good food and pastries and coffee and ripping track workouts. What was the energy like, if you can speak to that, if there's a word or, sentence on it?
Yeah, it was.
Or was it normal? Tell me if I'm wrong.
Let me think. Um, yeah, we were trying to strike a careful balance of being locked in, but also um, making sure that it wasn't a super stressful experience, which it can sometimes be when you have a big event on the horizon. So yes, I was there to help out, make sure workouts went well, but I also felt like my job was to keep things light and make sure that she was taking her, or that we were taking ourselves just as seriously as we needed to, and not a drop more, because being in a stress-free state is also important for performance.
What's next on tap for Tai Dinger? What are you looking forward to? Probably locked in on school. Take the people through what they can expect to see from you in the coming years.
Ooh, in the coming years, yeah, I mean, you'll still see me on the running circuit. I'm going to be moving up in distance, so I suppose this didn't really come up, but I was a 5K guy. Well, I was an 800 guy in college, moved up to the mile, then 5K, and now I'm going to make that last push up to half marathon for 2028. So I'll be on the roads in the future. Might be a few months because at the moment it's really adjusting to Harvard Law and trying to just like float, literally just like stay above the surface. It's so insane, but also I expect will be really rewarding to be in class with these people. But at the end of the day, I'm going to try to find a balance that makes me happy and that I feel is a balance worth striking. So I'm going to be figuring it out, just like all your listeners will be. I still need to figure out the balance that's right for me, and yeah, that's going to be like a project and reflection in itself.
Whenever this day is, when you hang up the, it sounds like with the roads, super shoes,
Mhm.
what would you consider success for your time in the sport? Like, what would you have to do, or what's your kind of mindset on like what a successful career would look like from top to bottom?
Yeah, I should think more about this. I'll say the goal is definitely to contend for the Olympic team, but I definitely think I can have a successful career without making the team. I think my goal has always been to just see what my body can do, and I feel like if I've given that a faithful effort, um, given the constraints of other things I want to achieve in life, which are my goals and maintaining relationships, like we just talked about, um, and so in that way, like making sure I've turned every stone given the constraints, that will be meaningful. Trying to keep it vague though, because I don't know what my goals will be in a year or two, and I want to make sure I leave room for other things that I become passionate about or decide I want to put more energy into, and give myself grace if I maybe drift away from the sport for a few months to pursue other interests. Um, but at the end of the day, cultivate a community, get the most out of myself, and remain in love with the sport, as like vague um, things to shoot for.
Something I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, being around, someone like Elise this past summer, or being college teammates with someone like Grant Fisher, the numerous names you can name off. What would you say is the difference between the people that make it, like make it, and are running American records and contending for medals, or in Grant's case, getting medals, versus those who have a successful career but can never take that next step? Because I think a lot of times people talk about like what it takes to run in college, like from high school to college, but I don't think there's enough discussion around like what it takes for the people that are really dedicated to then make that like next big jump. And I think there's no better
Yeah,
person to ask than someone who has been surrounded by the people that have been successful at taking that jump.
and who personally hasn't taken the jump. Let me remind your
I don't know,
listeners.
dude. I can
I
read the
think
results. They're pretty good.
I think um, yeah, it's there's a question of like, do you want to do it? Like, is it that important to you that you perform at the highest levels of the sport? Because it is, as we've mentioned so many times, going to require several sacrifices to things that are meaningful to you, like time with your friends, or I don't know, time playing video games if that's important to you, or it just is going to take sacrifices. And it's not to say that like it's right to prioritize running, or it's like that's what you should want to do. Like there's no should in this game. Like you just have to think intrinsically, what like is it something you just want to do? Like is it something you dreamed about doing from like a young age, and is it worth the sacrifices? So Elise and Grant and all my other teammates who are winning medals at the Olympics, they decided, yes, this is the one thing I want to do in my life, or at least in the next like 10 years of my life, right? Because we said, you can't have everything right now, but you can have it in the future, maybe. But for these 10 years, like, this is what I really, really, really want. And it's totally okay to not want that, like to that level, for that not to be the number one thing you want in life. And then, of course, I think if you're talking specifically about the upper echelons of the sport, uh, I've run into, I feel like, a genetic barrier. Like my VO2 max is my VO2 max, and I'm not going to be able to match. Like, it's funny, I did a threshold workout with Grant in Switzerland, St. Moritz before Paris, and there are just levels to the game. Um, and I'm at a place where I'm at peace. Like I can get a lot out of the sport without winning an Olympic medal. And it's not just I've convinced myself of that. Like I truly believe it's true that if you're in it for the right reasons, to test yourself and learn about yourself, then you can do that without going to the Olympics. Um, and so I'm okay with Grant's threshold pace being 4:30 and mine being 4:50 on a great day, you know, because he was born with a talent that was deserving of two Olympic bronze medals, um, and I wasn't. But that doesn't mean I can't get just as much out of the sport, or maybe even more than Grant can. Yeah, I don't mean that in like a depressing way.
No,
It's
dude,
like it
totally.
can be
I mean,
hard. Yeah,
I'll,
it can be hard to
I-
to
I'll,
face that, but
yeah, all I'll say is like, I mean, there's sometimes I see like mom hobby joggers, and I think they're having way more fun with the sport and finding way more value running 11-minute miles than I ever have. And that can be a gut check reality of like, that person is just excited to lace up their shoes and
yeah,
get away from their kids for 30 minutes and breathe some fresh air. And
yeah,
there's some beauty in that of like, they probably have never heard the name of Grant Fisher, but they
yeah,
loving
right.
the simple act of running. It's the same sport.
It's beautiful.
Um, yeah, running means different things to different people, and I think that's what makes it
Hmm.
so special. Wrapping up this conversation, Ty, you're a guy I want to ask this question to. I don't know if I've ever asked this question, but like unbelievably successful in every avenue of life. if you were to just go, okay, let me talk here. You're
No.
shaking it. You're too humble. You're too humble. Very successful, someone that people should aspire to be like. For you, for a younger listener, what are some systems you think, as you think back to your high school years, or those around you of successful people, what are some systems you think a younger listener could apply to their life that would bring them more fulfillment and meaning?
There will be moments when you are faced with sacrifices, even in high school. And I wish I had been more explicit about what sacrifices to make. And the success that I found in running and school is despite me not making those sacrifices. Not like, I think I kind of accidentally wandered into this position. And um, you know, so I would encourage like high school kids to really think about what is important to you. Like what does a if your path is to go to college, what does a successful college experience look like? Um, but also in high school, whether you have a year left or 4 years left, like what would be a meaningful year for you? If it's going all in on running um, and you would enjoy doing that despite not maybe achieving all your goals. Like if you would enjoy that year, even if it didn't come with the awards at the end, would that still be a successful year for you? And likewise, maybe it's your last year of high school and you really want to cement your high school friendships and keep those relationships strong and nurture them, then prioritize that and do that in every phase of life, right? Like try to be as intentional with your decisions as possible, um, because they can add up, and sometimes they become just like habits that uh, will will yeah, like that you'll rely on in the future. Um, but also, just make sure that you're really in it because you're interested in it and it makes you happy. Like for me, school, I like school, which is why I'm in so much school right now. I liked it and I ended up being good at it. Like my mind just works in that way. So it makes sense for me to be here right now. If you don't like school, then like don't do it because other people are telling you to do it. It's not worth it. It's not going to bring you meaning in the future, and make you happy. So yeah, just basically think about yourself. Like you prioritize yourself, and think about what will make you happy, and then think about like the sacrifices you'll have to make to make that, like, to realize that year, that future.
Ty, two final questions for you, wrapping up our conversation. First one, we talked about, I don't remember our last conversation super well and the things we discussed, other than like really going through your running career and journey and when breath becomes air. I remember we had a fun discussion on that briefly. So, on the book theme, keeping the book theme in our episodes, what's a book you've read in the past 6 months to a year that's had an impact on you that you'd recommend for the listeners?
You know what was a good read that was made me think was a book, at least actually that Elise recommended, called Midnight Library. And the premise of the book, I'm not sure if you're familiar, is that the person, the protagonist, is coming to the end of their life and they're sent to a library and that's stocked with books on how their life would have uh, turned out differently had they made different decisions in the past. And maybe this is a function of getting old, but this topic of regrets can come up sometimes, and thinking and um, yeah, like thinking about things you could have done in the past and how your life would have changed, how be different today if you had made those decisions differently. And I won't give any spoilers, but it's just like it deals with basically regret, and not in a judgmental way that regret is bad or good, but just kind of reframes the discussion. And it's also completely fiction. it's not like a self-help type book. It's like it's a story that will make you think about the paths that your life can take.
I love it. I'll have to check that one out. If you and Elise both read it, it's got to be a good one. So, Ty, final question for you. Going to my coffee shop yesterday for the first time, pumpkin is on the menu. Fall is almost officially here, almost officially here. 11 days away. What's the go to like fall specialty drink, soundtrack, movie? What's like your what's the fall menu for Tai Dinger?
Man, being a New England person now, I think I have to say my favorite thing about fall is apple cider donuts. Like you go apple picking, and then afterwards they sell you these donuts that are like coated in sugar and taste like apple cider, and like nothing says fall like apple cider in a New England orchard. So I'm gonna be prioritizing that once it's actually fall in a few days.
I love it. Ty, I really appreciate the conversation. Always has me thinking, and I can always confidently say I walk away a better person from our discussions. Leaves me a lot of things to reflect on and chew on, which is ultimately how you become a better person. So excited to see the impact this makes, and yeah, become my lawyer one day, I guess is what I should say for running a firm.
Thanks, Dominic. Always great to be on. Appreciate the conversation too.